Hello, I'm James Henry, and this is The Message.
The Message.
We have been working on trying to vision and get a sense of what church is supposed to be, especially since we are looking forward to the day, maybe not all looking forward to, but it's coming, whether we look forward to it or not, a day when we might be temporarily without a permanent home. Some people might call that homeless. In fact, some people say to me, James, when are we going to be homeless? This isn't good. And I said, oh, it's great for us. You know, Jesus didn't have a home or a place to lay his head, and maybe it'll help us really refocus ourselves and ask ourselves what church really is and what does it look like, so that when we get to the next permanent location, we'll be ready. We'll be ready to be church. So as I was looking at texts that said to me, what does it mean to be church? I looked at this story. Now, the interesting thing that I realized I made a terrible mistake on is I didn't have Linda read verses 1 and 2, because you need to know who these parables that come up in Luke chapter 15 are addressed to. And they're addressed to Pharisees and religious people. They're religious and righteous people are sitting back and saying to Jesus, dude, why are you eating with sinners and tax collectors? This doesn't make any sense to us. So Jesus then tells this story. Now, the funny thing to this story is, in modern 21st century parlance, when I think about these texts, I think that probably this makes no sense to us. Because the bean counters say, you've got 99. Forget the one. Forget the one. It's out there. You know, you could be, it's the way that car manufacturers determine whether or not they ought to do a recall. You know, if there's only going to be a couple of suits and it's only going to cost them a couple of $1 million for a couple of wrongful death suits, they're not going to fix it. They're going to let it slide. If I've got 99 people, what about the one? All right, well, it's gone. I guess I'll just have to stop worrying about it. And yet Jesus tells us that God is not a bean counter. God's not interested in the statistics of what we ought to do, look after the 99. I mean, it doesn't say that that the shepherd in this case, leaves behind somebody to watch the 99. In fact, it just says that you would leave the 99 and go out to look for the one, wherever it is, the one that's lost out there. Now, the challenge of this passage is language, because so often we hear the word lost and sinner and we think everybody but me. You know, we think of lost and sinner as anybody out there who is not me, because I am not a sinner. If you know me, in fact, I can still remember in my first worship committee meeting, we don't have those anymore, but I had a worship committee meeting here at St. James in my first year here, 1992, when we had reinstituted the prayer of confession in worship. We would say a prayer of confession where we confessed our sins. And I had a guy sit across from me. He was the chair of the worship committee at the time, and he told me, I don't want to say the prayer of confession because I don't sin. I don't have any need for that prayer of confession in worship. And what do you say to that? I mean, where could you possibly get that idea? Now, when I think of the word sinner, and I want us to kind of, because it's so easy to use labels, to distance ourselves from other people, even from ourselves, what do we think, what do you think that Jesus might be saying in this parable about what a sinner is or what a lost one is? It's somebody who lives outside of the experience of God's love. Somebody who doesn't quite capture it, doesn't catch it, doesn't understand that the community of faith is a place where all are accepted and loved just as they are, just where they are, just who they are. And they miss that point. And so they think there isn't a place for them among the 99, because the 99 all look like good sheep. Jesus is actually preaching to the choir. These are guys who spend their lives, and they were guys. The Pharisees and scribes were guys. They weren't girls. These are the choir. These are the insiders. These are the righteous guys. These are the guys who have taken and codified God's love into a series of rules. Now, I'm not one to say that rules ought to be thrown by the wayside altogether. I'm all for rules. There ought to be a few of them. I often talk to Mark Hayes. We'll be having lunch and we'll talk about rules and why there ought not to be some more rules about some things in the world. that they don't seem to be rules about. But the truth of the matter is, there is a danger when you codify love into rules. You ought to be very careful. I mean, look at how God codified love for us. There are 10 rules. Not 600, not 6,000, not 6 million. 10 rules about love, about not having other gods, about not worshiping other gods, about not making images of God because that limits who God might be, about remembering that we all need a Sabbath, about honoring our father and mother, not stealing, not killing, not committing adultery, not coveting what somebody else has. Those are the kinds of rules that kind of herd us in. It's kind of like a little sheepdog running around outside the sheep, keeping the sheep in the pen. If you do any of those kinds of things, love starts to fall apart. You need some rules. But when you start to codify all the rules so that the only way to be on the inside is if you wash your hands a certain way, or if you wear certain clothes, or if you sing certain songs, or if you look a certain way, or live a certain lifestyle, or have a certain amount of money, as soon as you codify that, you really are the one that's lost, not the one outside. Jesus is preaching to the righteous, to the choir, for a reason, because they need to remember that the whole purpose of the good news is to include more. There is an urgency, in a sense, when you lose the one and it's away from the 99, something could happen to it. Something could happen to that sheep. It could forget that it's loved. It could forget what it means to be a part of community. It could lose sight of that. So there is a sense of urgency to get out and go after the one that's no longer with you, that's living outside of the experience of God's love, that doesn't recognize and know the touch of the one who embraces us all. I think that one of the challenges of the church as bean counters over the centuries is we began to think of everybody as beholden to us, as being a part of that 99. And now, of course, I read all these seminars, I read about all these seminars, I see all these books, there's all this training, because finally now the church is getting desperate. We held the power for the longest time. Christendom, ever since 325. We were the insiders, and we could tell you who was in and who was out. Now, in the 21st century, in America, the supposed religious place that it is, less than 30% of people go to church. Less than 30%. In fact, I think that if we were more honest, it's probably less than 20% of people go to church, are part of community. There ought to be a real sense of community. What do you do if you're tending your sheep? Jesus would tell the story differently, I think, in the 21st century. He would say, what if you were tending your sheep and you had 20 sheep and 80 sheep went wandering off? What would you do? Just worry about the 20. I'm concerned about the 20. Let's take good care of the 20. Let's feed them a little bit better. Let's keep doing things the way we've always done them, because those 20 need to be happy. Because what happens if we're down to 19 because, 81 wander off, or 85 wander off and we're down to 15, and then we have this remnant theology about it's okay. There needs to be in our hearts a sense of urgency, because I meet people every day who do not know the love of God. I'm not talking about being lost or I'm talking about the sense that they feel like they're outside of God's grace. That there is no place for them in this room. That, of course, I think it's an excuse when people tell me, if I came to church, James, lightning might strike. Well, I come to church every Sunday with the anticipation lightning might strike me at any time, because I know how I live. I don't always live within the experience of God's grace. It's always there, but I don't see it. I don't catch sight of it. I lose track of it. And that's why part of your job is to come after me sometimes, as I get lost, as I get out there beyond the experience of God's grace. But there is this urgency that the church has, that we should have had for the last 2,000 years, that there are people outside of this experience of knowing God already loves you. God already loves you. It's not about what you do to get inside here. Every one of us have messed up. I'm looking at all of you. I am sure every one of you has messed up at least once this week. And if you haven't, then we need to be learning from you. I'm just going to sit down. Just raise your hand, come up, and you can be the teacher. Shirley, did you raise your hand? No? Okay. I thought Shirley was ready to come up here and give us a little talk. Every one of us makes mistakes. Every one of us lives as though we're outside of the experience of God's grace. And the rest of the world needs to know, like Shelby needs to know, that we're all in the embrace of God's love, that God already loves us right where we are. No matter what mistake you made this week, no matter what you did this week or didn't do this week, or no matter what you said to somebody or even thought, you're already loved by God. But that's not what the church says often enough in the world in which we live. We say, you'll be loved if you come to church on Sunday morning, if you say yes to our creed, if you believe exactly what our pastor preaches. I don't know if you all believe exactly what I preach. Sometimes I have listened to sermons from 10 years ago. I don't believe what I preached 10 years ago. I can't believe I said some of that stuff. It's a growing process. We hold people accountable. This is politics at its best. You know, Mark and I talk about this. If you believed one thing 30 years ago and you wrote a paper about it, don't ever try to run, because somebody will find that paper and hold it against you. What you believed 30 years ago is going to be held against you today. Well, see, in God's kingdom, it's not like that. In God's world, it's not like that. We are constantly growing. We're constantly changing. We're constantly perceiving the world in which we live differently. I see the fabric of God's love everywhere I go now. I used to think and be able to say to people, well, you know, you just can't experience God's love the same way if you're sitting under a tree somewhere as you do in our worship center. I don't think that's true. Now, the difference is, if you're going to sit under the tree out there, you better sit with a few other people, because you experience the grace of God with others. You experience it with others. And that's why I'm convinced this parable is about going after the one. Because the experience of God's love, for better, for worse, for the struggle, for the tear, for the brokenness that it causes, for the challenges, let's be honest, we rub each other wrong sometimes. There are people that have told me, I think it's great we're not in the worship center right now and that we're in the fellowship hall. It feels more comfortable, more close. And there are people who have said to me, James, I hate that we're in the fellowship hall. I want to be back in the worship center. When are we going to go? Can't we get back at the other end of the hall? As soon as we can get the air conditioning fixed. And who knows if it's worth doing if we're not long for this building. I don't know. So we rub each other wrong. Some things I say on Sunday morning, people say, James, I can't believe what you just said. Or what you said the other day. I can't believe that. When are you ever going to grow up about traffic? It's going to always be bad. Why do you always bring it up? I bring it up because I'm still working on it. I let somebody into traffic the other day. I regretted it immediately, but I did it. I did it. See? We can all grow. We can all change. We can all become better people. But we do it together, and we do it in community, and we do it where we rub each other wrong sometimes and where we don't agree all the time. But we don't go into our own corner with our own marbles and say, I'm not playing with you anymore. This story of the lost sheep, of the one who wanders away, who wanders outside of the experience of God's love, is a story that both is of the one who has yet to experience God's love and grace, or the one who rejects the 99 because they experience God's grace differently than they do. And somehow there has to be room among the 100 for that 100th one. Among the 99, we must make room for the one who doesn't see the world the same way we do. You know, not everybody who comes to this worship center has to believe the exact same thing we do. They may be on the journey that is parallel to ours, that's open and interested and wants to know more about this God and this Jesus guy. And the only place they're going to get it is in here. But if we close that door and say, you know what, you can come to our church if you believe in God, and God will love you if you behave a certain way, has missed this whole point. The whole point of this story is God already loves you. God's already coming after you. God is relentless. God does not give up on you even when you've given up on yourself. God continues to come and come and come. And we need to experience and know that God is urgently calling us as the church to share the love of God. We don't need another judgmental voice in the world. Listen to the news for a little while. Any version of it. Any version. From the left, from the right, sometimes from the middle. It's all about judging somebody else because they did something different, because they're wrong. When will we just learn to be honest and accept each other so that that 100th sheep can be welcomed back easily among the 99? Is it going to, well, maybe not easily. Probably part of the challenge is we live in a consumer society, and as soon as it's no longer easy, we stop doing it. We want everything to be easy. We want food to be fast. We want to pop it in the microwave, but we want it to taste like a gourmet chef made it for us. Not that the microwave zapped it for us. We would like everything to be easy, but guess what? Being church is hard. Being church is the 99 of us going out there to look for the folks who have yet to experience the love of God fully and help them experience it. And it may be by inviting them to come and hang out with us in worship. It may just be helping them walk across the street. It may be holding the door for them. It may be greeting them in a positive way. You know, my family thinks I'm crazy. And you probably do too. That's okay. I never meet a stranger. Some strangers wish that I met strangers, I think. But everyone I meet, I just talk to them like they're a person. I treat them like they're a person. Do you do the same thing? Do you think of that person who's behind the counter when you're in line as a person, not just somebody to meet your needs? Do you think of that person that's on the other end of the line when you're calling to ask for something or tell somebody something as a person? Can you picture a face when you're talking out loud to somebody else? Because when you picture a face, when you picture someone dear to you, how do you behave? How do I talk to Linda versus to the telemarketer who's calling me today? Because if it's not similar, I got some work to do. The story of the 99 and of the 100th. There's actually 100 sheep, 99 and one that's out wandering around, is a story told to religious people like us. We're the target of the story. Because oftentimes we're satisfied with the 99, or in the 21st century, the 20, and forget the 80. Let them be happy doing whatever they're doing. And if they're happy, if they're really fulfilled in what they're doing, it's not our job to try to change them. But we do offer another way. I talk to people who don't believe the way I believe all the time. In fact, I make it my mission in life to talk to people who are different than me. I don't need somebody else to pat me on the back and say, yes, James, you're absolutely right. Because I know I am. So I need people who say to me, James, have you not been reading history about God? Because it seems like to me every major war has something to do with God. What is wrong with God? I don't want to believe in a God that starts wars. There's an opportunity right there. I don't want to believe in a God that starts wars either, because I don't believe God does. But until you listen to somebody else who has a different point of view, you'll never know. This is a comfortable little bastion of hopefulness. We've got a building all to ourselves. I'm already concerned about what it's going to be like when I can't schedule things when I want to schedule them in the space I want to schedule them in. One of the great things about having a building is if I want to kick the Wednesday night Ethiopian church out because I want to meet here in the building, I just call them up and say, I'm sorry, you can't worship this week because I'm in charge. I'm the boss. I make the rules. Get out for this week. Being out in the world means learning to accommodate, learning to listen, learning to not be in control. It's an illusion anyway. I can't control the 99 in here or the one out there. And you know what? That's not my job anyway, even though I sometimes like to think it is. The best I can do is model the love of God. The best you can do is model the love of God. Wherever you go this week, model the love of God. Listen to somebody who's different than you. Make it a point this week to talk to somebody who thinks differently than you. And when I said talk, I don't mean argue. I don't mean saying, you know, you happen to be wrong. If you came to my church, James would tell you. James might not tell you. James might tell you you're wrong to tell the other person that they are. It's not relativism, it's love. And if we're all on the journey, the arms of God are wide open to embrace us wherever we are on that journey and to invite others to join with us. Does it slow us down a little bit? Sure. But it also invites us to see things from a different perspective. Have you ever thought about that 100th sheep out there somewhere who says, what's that weird thing you do on Sunday mornings? And by the way, I work on Sundays. So why don't you do that weird thing you do on Monday nights? Well, it's inconvenient for us. We're busy on Monday nights. We like to come on Sunday mornings. If we listened to the 100th sheep, if we sought after the 100th sheep, not because we thought they were a sinner lost, but because we didn't feel like everyone we encountered had had a bridge built for them, had had a door opened for them, had had the love of God shared with them in such a way that it says, you're already loved. Not you could be loved if, but you are already loved. Come and experience it. Share it with me. Be on this journey with me. The world would be a different place. And that's God's vision for church. The urgency of sharing that love. I don't know what it's going to take for us to feel like it's urgent. Is it going to be when there's one in religion and 99 out there? Are we going to finally feel, you know, when I'm preaching to myself? We need to feel that urgency now to embrace others with the absolute love and unconditional love of God wherever we go. Because that's God's urgent message. Go build bridges this week. Go listen to people different than you. And if you got a chance, share a little bit of love wherever you go. Because that one apparently matters at least as much, if not more, as the 99 who already get it.